Yo, it's Guido coming at you with a tactics talk, actually a quick tip for today, and we are going to talk about side scraping. Got a great side scraping tank here. We had a Chrysler GF. We're on Himmel's Enskadorf. We're in this part of the map right here, this middle part that is just side scraper heaven. Lots of ways to do it from both sides. Before we get into that though, we're going to talk a little bit about shell mechanics just really quickly. And we're going to give you the caveman version of these things, some of the important stuff in terms of side scraping. So with an AP shell, your standard AP shell, it will overmatch if you have ×3 the caliber of the armor you're hitting. For example, you're shooting a 120 millimeter gun. Say the tank you're shooting has 30 millimeters of armor. That's well more than 3 times in the caliber. So you will automatically pen. That's one kind of overmatch, the automatic pen overmatch. There is an overmatch if you have 2 times. So say you've got the same 120 millimeter gun and you're shooting at 60 millimeters of armor. So that's 2 times. That will reduce the reduce the effective armor, increase the normalization. Okay, so there's some penetration math that happens there. Basically what's happening is once you get to 2 times, you're going to have a better chance of pinning. When you get to 3 times, it's automatic with the AP shell. The AAP shells have a standard normalization of 5 degrees. This will decrease the angle for the calculation by 5. So if you're hitting 70 degrees of angle on the armor, it will calculate it as if it's 65 degrees. And with AP, it's an automatic ricochet at 70 degrees of angle unless it's a ×3 overmatch, which is an auto pen. Whew. All right. APCR has normalization as well, but it's only 2 degrees. Heat will ricochet at 80 degrees, so heat requires more angle to ricochet. All right, so that's a lot of little details in there, and there's actually several other nuances. All of those things work in together with each other. A couple of them work at the same time. So there are a lot of resources out there if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty. But I always say this is going to be the caveman version of it. What does all that mean? It means when you side scrape, you want to give the guy as much angle as possible. When you side scrape, you want to give the guy as much angle as possible. We're going to show you an example here in a minute, but let's head on over here and we're going to grab the old Chrysler K, bring it on up here and show you kind of what I'm talking about. So when you're side scraping, what you're going to do is you're going to expose as little of your tank as possible with as high an angle as possible. The nice thing about a Chrysler K is it has a rear mounted turret, which means as it backs out, and typically side scraping is going to be backing out, you're going to be pulling out backwards like this, all right? With a rear mounted turret, that allows you, because you're going to show the back end of your tank first, to bring your turret to bear a little bit easier than if you have a front-mounted turret like an IS-3, and we'll show you this as an example, or even a mid-turret. A mid-turret's a little better. Rear turret is probably the best case. So you can see that we've got 100 millimeters here on the armor on the side of this thing, and at that angle it's 101 effective. As I increase the angle, the effective armor increases to 167, a little bit more. Now we're getting into that auto bounce and very high amount of effective armor, and then we can get to here and we have the auto ricochet. Notice that the effective angle there is 70.5, so that's that 70 degrees auto ricochet for an AP round, and that's versus its own gun right there, which I think is only a 105. Because the side of the Chrysler is 100 millimeters, you would have to have, for a ×3 overmatch, 300 millimeter gun. That is one of the reasons why this thing is so good at side scraping. In addition, to only get the ×2, where you're decreasing or getting better normalization, essentially, via the calculation, you would have to have a 200 millimeter gun in order to do that. So this thing is a bit of a beast in the side scraping area. Plus the turret's pretty good too. So when you expose the turret is also very difficult to pen at the same time, and the weak spot is very small, and there are no weak spots on the front other than the lower hole. And that's why you want to try to keep yourself side scraping so that you do not present the lower hole. Let's take a quick example or take a look at this fight right here and what that kind of looks like in gameplay. All right, so I'm coming up here. I like this spot because you can push the front of your tank into the building right there. And when I side scrape, I'm only exposing, see if I can do this here. When I side scrape, I'm only exposing a very little bit of my tank, right? I don't have a zoom function, unfortunately. So you can see as I side scrape, I'm not showing the front. I'm not giving him the lower plate. I'm just giving him the side and a little bit of my turret. I've got to clear the gun from the obstacle. That's the only thing I'm looking for. That's why that rear mounted turret is better for backing up in those situations or for side scraping. So I catch the guy crossing, we get some damage. All right, side scraping while I'm on a reload, there's no reason to sit out there unless you're trying to do a bounce mission of some kind. So I'm going to push up, notice the reload timer, and about the time I'm reloaded, I'm going to come back out so that I'm ready to shoot just as I come out. Maybe a little bit early. Larva goes by, that's great, easy shot. We'll do the same thing, we'll push up. We'll back out. Notice as I do this, I am really minimizing the amount that my lower plate is exposed, right? Because of that rear turreted tank design, I can keep that lower plate behind the cover right there. So I'm only going far enough to get my gun clear. We'll see what we can get here next. Now, the IS-3 is going to make a bit of a mistake here. Actually, he crosses, but I get into the upper plate. So I actually hit him with his effective armor on that upper plate as he went by. Was extremely high, and I'll get a bounce off of that. Just keep on backing up. That's maybe a little too far because I was exposing my lower plate there, but I am looking for this guy. I'm like, is he going to make another move? All right, this time, as he comes in, he shifts slightly. I know there's a cheek right there on the IS-3, so I'm going to shoot right there, and I get a nice pen. And he pushes up in here. And he's going to try to do a little side scraping himself. But here we're going to see somebody who doesn't do it quite right. Actually, I bounce off the 112. Get into the angles on that guy. All right, now here comes the IS-3, and notice his side scraping attempt as we zoom out. Look at the angle, my angle relative to him, very highly angled, and his angle relative to my gun is much less. Take a look at what this looks like as I back out. And the other thing about a rear turreted gun is, or turreted tank, is I'm going to be able to pull out and I can get my gun online onto the back of his tank because he is a forward turreted tank. I have his rear end sticking out. It's not nearly as well angled as mine if you take a look at this. And as it sits, he doesn't even have his gun on me, right? He's looking back here. He might see the back sprocket or so right there, but I don't know if he can even see any of my tank yet based on looking where his gun line is, and I'm going to sneak a shot up underneath him right there, all right? So for the IS-3, what that's looking like is a little bit like this. Okay, so he's sitting there. He backs out at a worse angle around right there. Even if he came out at a better angle, though, notice he has to put so much of the back of his tank back here. That has to all stick out before he can bring his turret online and be able to point at me and shoot. So if we look at the IS-3, I've got actually the Chrysler GF spamming gold, the APCR. So that's giving me an effective 203, and this thing has a pen of 260. So a pretty good chance. He does have some angled stuff going on there, so I want to avoid that. But if I'm going through the wheels, it looks like there's some absorbed stuff and whatnot with the road wheels or the return wheels on the top. But we can have a pretty good chance of penning right into the back of that guy underneath the track on that nice soft side section. You do want to avoid this because it is angled. All this goofy stuff here with some spaced armor and crap going on right there. So you want to avoid that. But underneath here where that flat hole is, and he's just giving me too much angle. Now I'm going to come out again and try another shot. See where I get the aim in on this guy. I'm trying to up underneath and just doesn't quite get there. I think I actually got into that upper armor piece that's angled. Okay, there's a bounce, all right? So I've taken two bounces, one of them from the IS-3. The other one, he did get my track, so I got detracked right there. But I bounced both of those based on, look how high that angle is. They're just really not going to have any chance shooting AP to get through this thing's armor right there. All right, the other thing is now this 112 is kind of playing a dangerous game. Instead of angling or instead of side scraping, he's coming out forward just a little bit. He's trying to bait a shot, but he's going to give me just enough of his lower hole here that's not tracked that I'm going to sneak one in right underneath that, and I'll just come forward. He actually misses that shot. And there's the ice 3 again. Just take a look at this. He is just well over angled. We come on up here. Let's just go up and do a little space action. Kind of look at the two angles of the tanks here. Get a little in the middle there. And you can see here that I am presenting a really high angle, and his is just not as much. He'd be doing a lot better if his rear end was facing more like that way. Still, though, that makes him expose a lot more of his tank before he can get his gun online. Okay, he pushes up. I think I sneak maybe another one. I'm trying to do this there. The 112 gives me another shot into the same spot. He doesn't learn. Pull back, no problem. The IS-3 has pulled out again. Too much angle. I'm just going to come out here. Boom. And man, I don't know if he shifted or what happened there, but it looked like he shifted even a little more there, and we take that guy down. So there you go. A little lesson on side scraping. The rear turreted heavies are a little bit ungainly overall, but in this situation, they're really good. All the same mechanics apply, though, if you're middle turreted or rear turreted. The more armor you have, the better. We discussed a little bit about the 3 times overmatch and the fact that 2 times gives you a bit of an advantage for penetration mechanics. We talked about 80 degrees auto bounce for heat, so you need a better angle to auto bounce the heat, and 70 degrees for the AP. Any other details or points in there that I might have missed, you guys go ahead and chuck it in there for everybody who's trying to figure this whole thing out. That's all I've got for today. We will see you.